Please come to order. Good morning. Welcome to the Commissioner of St. Mary's County meeting this day, Tuesday, August 26, 2025. I am Randy Guy, President and Commissioner of St. Mary's County. I'd like to introduce the other commissioners. Standing to my right, representing the 1st Commissioner District, which includes Ridge, Piney Point, St. George Island, Mr. Eric Colvin.
Good morning.
Representing the 2nd Commissioner District, which includes Leonardtown, Hollywood, Mr. Mike Hewitt.
Good morning.
Standing to my left, representing the 3rd Commissioner District, which includes Charlotte Hall, 7th District, Golden Beach, and Mechanicsville, and Mr. Mike Alderson Jr.
Good morning.
Representing the 4th Commissioner District, which includes Lexington Park, some of California, Great Mills, and some of Hollywood, Mr. Scott Oster.
Good morning.
Seated next to Commissioner Oster at the end of the dais is David Weisskopf, our County Administrator.
Good morning.
To my immediate right is Julia Birch, our Recorder for today. Standing at the table to my right is our Communications Director, Jana Guzman.
Good morning.
Our video media production team is behind the glass. Please turn your cell phones off or on vibrate. When you come to the presenter's table, please come down the center aisle. And remember, this meeting is being televised, so you need to speak clearly and directly into the microphone for recording purposes. In other words, look good. At this time, I'd like everybody to please stand for the invocation and pledge. Dear Heavenly Father, we thank you for this day that we gather here to represent our county and help you make good decisions for all the people of St. Mary's County. And we also actually thank you for the good weather we've been having lately after all the heat we went through. Now it's almost fall, and it's in August. It's unbelievable. But thank you very much for everything. Amen. Please join me with the pledge.
Allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Please be seated. Next, we need the approval of the consent agenda.
So moved.
Second.
I have a first and second. All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Ayes have it. Next, we have a proclamation for Women's Equality Day. I would make one reference. It doesn't say anything in here about actually started here in St. Mary's County back in the 1700s. 1600s, what? I can't remember the lady's name,
If you're
but
talking about Miss Brent, yeah.
yes. Yep. I get this out. Hello, ladies. How are you? How you doing? I didn't finish my story, but it was 1600. I was corrected. And the lady, actually, her husband died. At that time, only landowners could vote. So she went to a meeting to vote, and the men said, "You can't vote. You're a woman." They said, "Well, I own land." They still wouldn't allow her to vote. And at that time, she started to push to get women the right to vote at that time. Took a long time. Whereas on August 26, 1920, the 19th Amendment of the United States Constitution was certified, granting women the right to vote and making a historic victory in the long and determined struggle for women's rights. And whereas in 1971, August 26, we designated as Women's Equality Day in the U.S. to commemorate this achievement and to serve as a reminder of the ongoing efforts needed to achieve gender equality in our society. And whereas Women's Equality Day serves as a powerful reminder of the progress made while also highlighting the continuing challenges and disparities that women face in achieving full equality in the workplace, in education, in healthcare, and in leadership positions across all sectors. And whereas St. Mary's County recognized the invaluable contributions of women to the social, economic, and political fabric of our community and is committed to promoting and advancing gender equality and empowerment of all women and girls. Now, therefore, we, the Commissioner of St. Mary's County, do hereby proclaim August 26, 2025 as Women's Equality Day and encourage all citizens to join in celebrating the achievement of women, acknowledging challenges that remain, and supporting the ongoing efforts to achieve the equality of all for all. This date, August 26, 2025.
Good morning. I'm Catherine Stewart, the chair of the Commission for Women, and I'd like to thank President Randy Guy and the commissioners for always honoring this great day. Thank you very much, everyone. And just think, 1920, that was like 105 years ago. So keeping on, keeping on. Thank you.
Good morning. I'm Tracy Shivers. I'm a new member of the Commission for Women.
Good morning. I'm Lori Jennings Harris, the Director of the Department of Aging and Human Services, and just want to reiterate the importance of recognizing women and the contributions that women make throughout every part of our society, every facet. Thanks to the commissioners for their recognition.
Good morning, Cynthia Brown, Human Services Division Manager, and I'd like to thank the volunteers on the Commission for Women for their continued dedicated service to our county.
Okay, and we jump right into county administrator time.
Thank you, Commissioner President Guy, and as always, we'll start with the draft agendas for September 9th and September 16th. There will be no meeting of the commissioners on September 2nd. On September 9th, you'll start at your normal time and place, followed by 4 proclamations, one for Forget-Me-Not Month, National Recovery Month, National Suicide Prevention Month, and International Underground Railroad Month, followed by a 9:15 Department of Land Use and Growth Management public hearing, text 25-0112, amendment to allow use type 28 in RCA overlay, followed by county administrator, commissioner's time, closed session for litigation strategy and personnel, adjourn, and then have the state of the county at Bay District Volunteer Fire Department. On September 16th, we'll start here in the lobby at 8:30 with the years of service reception. Start at 9 o'clock, your normal time, followed by 4 proclamations, one for the National Constitution Week, National Senior Center Month, Hispanic Heritage Month, and St. Mary's County Library 75th anniversary, followed by years of service award ceremony, county administrator, and commissioner time.
Would like to point one thing out, that the state of the county at Bay District Fire Department is not at 11:30 p.m.
Oh, correct.
Yeah. If you come at 11:30 p.m., nobody will be there.
Correct. There's a typo. And the first on our agenda today is from the Department of Aging and Human Services for fiscal year '25, Federal Older Americans Act Notification of Grant Award 1 and 2. Director Lori Jennings Harris presenting. Welcome.
Thank you, Mr. Weiskopf, and good morning, commissioners.
Good morning.
Again. As just mentioned, this is the notification of grant award for the first and second. The second is listed as a correction, but we get multiple awards from the Maryland Department of Aging. These are federal grants, and the term is October 1st, 2024 through September 30th, 2026. It's not uncommon for us to receive updates, revisions to the notification of grant award, sometimes up, sometimes down. But this is the second award, and these funds go toward programs including, but not limited to, congregate meals, home-delivered meals, preventative health, and the National Family Caregiver Support Program, as well as the Ombudsman Program. The amount of the award is $408,505. So looking for the commissioner's approval.
And I see there's a county match in here. It talks to 41,745 and then another 40,000. So like 82,000 will have to.
Yes.
All right, so 80.
Entertain a motion?
I'll move to approve the FY25 Federal Older Americans Act Notice of Grant Awards 1 and 2 from the Maryland Department of Aging on behalf of the St. Mary's County Department of Aging and Human Services in the amount of $408,505.
Second.
Hold on. The attached budget amendments and authorize the Commissioner President to execute all related documents.
Now I second.
I have a first and a second. All in favor? Aye. Any opposed? Ayes have it.
All right, thank you, Commissioners.
Thank you.
Thank you. Next up, from the Department of Emergency Services is a request for the Sandgates Radio Tower remediation. Director, Jen Utz.
Dave got
Deputy
promoted this time.
Director, Shay.
It's good to be back in the role. Thank you, Mr. Weisgall. Good morning, Commissioners.
Morning.
We continue to work through the process of the microwave replacement project that was funded in FY25. And part of that project was, of course, the structural analysis on each of the 13 tower sites around the county.
Okay.
2 of those tower sites came back as needing remediation, one being the Sandgates Tower, which the county owns, and the other being the 3-notch tower that the state owns. So the 3-notch tower, we're in discussions with the state. They need to, they're going to remove equipment from their tower to bring it into compliance, but they have some budget processes to work through in order to fund that, to do the climb, to take the old equipment off, to bring it into compliance. We need to add some diagonal reinforcement to the base of our tower, which will cost $138,967. So we met with the CFO to determine the best route to fund this. So we're requesting to utilize exempt financing for the additional funds needed to complete this project. And we have found within our own budget the emergency support reserve for the first year's payment of $31,963. So our request is for exempt financing to complete this project for the necessary reinforcement of that tower, and then to realign our budget funds for FY26 to support the first year payment. And then we'll look and, obviously have to budget forward into FY27 and forward, 3-year plan to make the payments.
So tell me, the microwave thing, that was expensive. And the point was, is that the current one's at the end of life. Is that true? So the new one requires additional upgrades to operate with it? So it's like getting new software. Sometimes you need new hardware too?
Correct.
So that's what it boils down to?
Right. Dishes, routers,
Gotcha. And we've only identified 2 towers that need to be, one's
remediated.
ours and one's
Yes.
somebody else's.
I move to approve the Department of Emergency Services to realign funds and utilize exempt financing for the remediation of the Sandgates Tower and to approve a budget amendment by reducing the emergency support reserve account by $31,963 for the first year payment.
Second. Second.
I have a first and a second. All in favor? Aye. Any opposed? Ayes have it.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Motion 2.
Motion 2, I further move to authorize the Commissioner President to execute all related documents.
Second.
I have a first and a second. All in favor?
Aye. You could have left.
We were just excited. We were just excited.
Thank you. Next up is Department of Finance for fiscal year 2027 budgeting presentation. Director Vanetta Van Cleef,
This is
Deputy
information only.
Director Joy Sapp, and Gary Whipple for the CIP portion, Deputy Director of DPW&T. Welcome.
Welcome.
Good morning.
Good morning.
All right, we're here this morning to kick off, as, excuse me, County Administrator indicated, the FY27 budget conversation. During the course of this past year, let's see if I can, oh, there we go. As we went through our operating budget, what we were doing was incremental budgeting, taking past history, adding on any increases or recognizing any decreases and moving through. During the course of that conversation, excuse me, there was interest expressed in learning more about zero-based budgeting. So that's specifically what we're going to talk about during the course of this conversation to see if there is any appetite to have further discussion. So what is zero-based budgeting? Every expense must be justified for each new period, starting from a zero base, hence the zero-based. We just call it ZBB if we can keep to that acronym. Unlike traditional budgeting, which adjusts prior budgets, ZBB requires a fresh evaluation of all expenses.
Okay, let me hold you on, because I read through this
Okay.
twice. What is different than what we're doing now? We always expect people to be able to justify their request. And I mean, I know Commissioner Colvin and myself, probably other commissioners, have always talked to how we end up with money that hasn't been spent at the end of the year, and why was it requested if it wasn't going to be used, or if it hadn't been used in a couple of years. How is this going to be different by requiring a fresh evaluation? Right now, we're not doing fresh evaluations?
We're doing incremental evaluations.
Yeah, I
So
wrote
just
that
looking
down.
at if there are changes, what are those changes? It's more in-depth, it's more time-consuming.
Okay, all right.
It's,
Let me let you go ahead, and I'll save my questions.
Well, I will
to-
say one thing I've noticed is, maybe not every year, but it seems like a lot of years, we take whatever the previous year's budget was and simply inflate it by a certain percentage, maybe 2%, 3%. And
4%,
this is
whatever.
different
Correct.
than that.
Yes.
Yeah, this is starting to what do you actually need, not what did you receive last year.
Exactly. It's a different perspective. So I can't speak to the individual levels of analysis that each division manager goes through in their analysis of what those changes need to be, but in many cases, it's just looking at, kind of what did I budget last year, what did I spend, what have I seen change, and layering that information onto the existing budget.
All right,
And also-
I'll let you get through.
And also, what didn't we spend that perhaps we don't need to bring back into this next budget?
Correct. There may also be instances where something is bi-cyclical, biannual, where it stays in the budget each year so that it is not an issue in the upcoming year.
Okay.
I have seen some instances of that. All right, so did try to put these in the order of magnitude. The pros, we'll start with the pros, alignment of spending with strategic goals. And we're going to talk about that a little more on the next slide. Higher accountability and increased transparency. So this really promotes a culture of ownership and responsibility. Each line item has an actual justification associated with it. Rather than just justifying the increases or the decreases, we're actually speaking to that line item. It encourages innovation. We rethink the processes as we really dig into what is it we're doing and why are we doing it. We rethink those processes, and this may promote cost efficiency. Now, let me point out that is not a primary goal, and we'll talk about that when we get to the cons. But we may identify unnecessary spending. During the course of this, when we look at it from a strategic perspective, we may identify gaps in our processes. And it allows more transparent priority setting. When each line is justified and is associated with a strategic goal, then the commissioners can prioritize based on the extent to which those projects, those resources are being spent according to the strategic goals. On the con side, there may be some resistance to change. I've heard, quite often, we have a long history in this county. And sometimes we've been doing the things we've been doing the way we've been doing them for a very long time. So that can be a major hurdle to overcome, requires a lot of change management. And the implementation of this the success is dependent on staff skill sets and efficiency. So it is a completely different perspective on budgeting. We would have to develop that, and we'll talk about that more. Now, when I said promotes cost efficiency, and that's not the primary goal, the reason that's not the primary goal is one of the downsides to this is when you put everything under a microscope, there may be a potential for a short-term focus. Someone may be motivated or it may be perceived to incentivize cutting cost in the short term to appear very efficient when that is not in the long-term best interest of that division, department, or the organization. So, pros and cons, they're very linked here. It's very time-consuming Again, when you're looking not just at changes, but when you're actually justifying each line item and thinking through those processes, it's a lot more labor intensive than our current process. There's a high administrative burden, requires documentation, justification, and identifies gaps. And you notice that's on the pros and the cons both. Yes, if there's a gap and we identify it, that is a good thing. The con can be, it could be a very expensive gap. It could be a gap that is hard to fill and just can create more priority setting, if you will.
Question.
Yes.
You mentioned justifying each line item.
Mm-hmm.
Can you explain a little bit what that process actually really looks like? So, because I know, like for my day job, when for my budget for my department, we do zero-based budgeting, but I think it'd be beneficial to explain what that really looks like so people can understand what that justification process really is.
I'll speak to it high level on this slide, and then we can go into more detail if that doesn't meet your goal. First off, looking at departments, divisions, directors, managers, really what they are out there is they're the little mini business owners, right? In nonprofit business, but a business nonetheless. So looking at the goals, what do you want to achieve this year? Starting there, rather than starting with what money do you have to work with from last year and what can we increase, looking at really what do you want to achieve? Okay, now how are you going to achieve that? Yeah, what is your plan, your operating plan to reach those goals? All right, here's your plan. What are your activities within that plan, and what resources do you need to get those activities done to reach those goals?
And this is a written report that they submit, each department head?
Yes, yeah. It would be a write-up with outlining the goals and the activities, and then, of course, on each line item of cost, that's when it would be associated with a goal. This is a needed to achieve this. So, for instance, if customer service is the increase in the goal, you know, our customer service satisfaction is here, and we need to raise it here, what do we need to get there? Do we need more staffing? Do we need more hours at the on the telephone lines? I'm not picking on any particular department here. I'm just kind of like doing a generic customer service conversation. Okay, if we need 24/7 staffing, what does that look like? Currently, we only have 12 hours of staffing. We want to expand to 24. We would need this level of staffing. Therefore, the resources required would be X. And it all flows together. Basically, it's looking at every expenditure or resource expenditure from the aspect of what is it that this should attain.
Excellent.
Okay? All right, what would it take to implement? This is also, how do we address the cons in the, to make sure that those cons do not impede a successful implementation? Executive sponsorship. You all, the county administrator, that executive sponsorship is going to be needed because this requires a cultural change. As I indicated, we've been doing these things a long time. The way we've been doing them, it's a real cultural change. And that can be a challenge in that change management. So leadership buy-in, excuse me. We need to reach out, and this is crucial, to all of those leaders and the engaged stakeholders. Provide the education, have the conversations, get that buy-in on the benefit versus the cost, setting clear goals. And this is, you know, resource allocation in alignment with county priorities. And that can change from year to year. So this is a reoccurring conversation each year. Where do we want to go? What are the priorities? How do we meet that? Establishing new practices. We have to develop the tools. We have to develop the methodologies, provide out the training not only to my staff internally with the budget analyst. They've been doing it the way we've been doing it for a very long time, so I need to develop them, develop the training tools, also work with all the finance administrators out in the organization as well as the directors and managers in providing a sound foundation of understanding in order to implement this successfully. We have to develop the tools and the budgeting reporting. So it's a big, whole new process That's why we're having this conversation early. If you express interest, we really need some lead time. This takes a lot of bandwidth to implement. Implement, monitor, refine each year as we move forward. Should we move forward? And there's a couple of options here. Now, as I've indicated, labor intensive, a lot of development, a lot of training materials, a lot of time. Options are going big bang, which is the entire organization, or using a pilot department and developing the training and the tools and the reports and all the templates and methodology with one department that is an engaged stakeholder with some financial acumen and a diversity in the types of services they provide so that we can develop a full set of methodology for implementing before we roll it out to the rest of the departments and, of course, our elected officials. And because we want to have a product that is sound and good, before we engage those external stakeholders potentially. And then, of course, the option I did not put on here because we're talking about zero-based budgeting is continuing with our current incremental budgeting. If the commissioners are looking at considering going forward, there are some things that we would need to consider because this is, again, a change. Options, minimum or maximum step or mid-step for open positions. I mean, this is a reoccurring theme that we've heard throughout budgeting and throughout the year is the open positions. Healthcare enrollment group, identifying how we would budget for those for the open positions. Currently, what we do is mid, and I probably wouldn't see any reason to change that, but these are decisions that would have to be made. Other payroll expenses, those are driven by the payroll expense. Whether or not you assume those open positions as a full-time employee or some part-time, whether or not you assume terminations during the year, pooled vacancies. This is a methodology by where within a given division, you look at historically how many open positions are there, how many months does it take to fill, and based on that information, you come up with a historical-based estimate of the positions that will be filled, and you can, so for instance, if it's filled within 1 or 2 months, you may choose to budget those in that department. The other positions being pulled out into a pooled vacancy and looking at the organization having these pooled vacancy, put all the vacancies in there that don't meet the criteria to be included in the division. As you move through the year, if divisions fill those positions they have in their budget and are able to fill those other positions quicker than anticipated, they come out of the pooled vacancy. But this pooled vacancy is not budgeted at 100%, creating that excess reserve that we currently have quarterly. The pooled vacancy is looking at historical information and estimating, okay, we have 10 positions, but historically the organization as a whole, because again, this is pooled, not individual, so it's more diversified, we only need to budget in that pool 3 positions, because throughout the organization, that's the anticipation of what will be used. So it really refines the way we look at how we are budgeting our expenses and our expenditures. And because it is more refined, it is more subject to changes. So if we miss by 1, it's going to be clear. It's as you move through the implementation phase, because it's much tighter, we are going to, in addition to the pooled vacancies, need a zero-based budgeting reserve, if you will, for the things that we missed.
That was going to be my question.
Thank you. I'm trying to think how to say this. It's, when you make things tighter and you implement a new system, things will be missed initially. So we need that extra reserve, just identifying that until, I would estimate 3 years. I mean, 3 years between the cultural change, the tool development, the rolling out to the entire organization, really getting our processes refined and our knowledge refined and our experience refined. For the first 3 years, we would definitely need that additional reserve, just recognizing that. When you're used to having this and then you squeeze it down to this, trying to be cognizant and good stewards of the resources, not tying up resources that can be utilized somewhere else. I mean, we have a lot of competing
Needs.
thank you, yes.
It seems to me like the pooled vacancy,
Mm-hmm.
I mean, that could work under any one, right? Or
It
incremental
could.
or the zero-based, right? I mean,
It
just-
could, yes, yeah. This was something that I was very interested in when I went to GFOA a few weeks ago. I had a particular eye on the pooled vacancy because that is a conversation that comes up with the open positions. Well, there's a lot of methodologies out there, but the pooled vacancies really resonated with me for an organization this size. I wouldn't suggest it in a small organization because there's not enough diversity. There's not the spread, if you will. But in this size of an organization with the number of open positions we have, I think it would be a very good tool to use. The other option, the other decision here, termination payouts. How do you treat those? Currently, when someone leaves the organization, all of the PTO is paid out, and that is booked as an expense at that time. So how do we treat that? And that, again, it would be a decision and a consideration. Again, as we become more refined, these things that we have kind of in our incremental budget without talking about it would no longer be in there. So we'd have to make proactive decisions about how to treat them and how to budget for them. If you consider and would like to move forward, staff does have some recommendations. I would suggest a pilot department. That would give us the opportunity, again, to develop the tools to have a successful implementation when we do roll out to the rest of the departments or increase that probability.
Have you identified a specific pilot department you would like to move forward on, or?
We've identified the criteria, but we haven't reached out to anyone pending the commissioner's consideration.
Would finance be a good department to start with?
We can certainly be one of them, but we would not be, we don't have the diversity to
Okay, so
be
you wouldn't be
fully.
big enough.
Yes. I mean, can certainly do finance
understand.
with the pilot department. That's not a problem.
So I think that brings up a good point, too. I definitely think, the big bang approach with rip the Band-Aid for everybody all at once is a little too fast for this. But I'm wonder if one pilot department is maybe a little too slow, if we could have a couple of our departments try to implement this at the same time. Not all of county government, but some of our departments, instead of just one.
Okay. Yeah, we can certainly explore that option. Yeah, as I indicated, finance is definitely on board if we go this way, but
Okay, go ahead.
consider, yes. As far as open positions, looking at the baseline staffing model without positions in this 6 month is just here for conversation purposes. For instance, greater than 6 months would be pooled into the open positions. I spoke with Catherine, our HR director, to determine the amount of analysis data that we have available, and the data is available to do a historical organizational analysis to determine what that number would actually be should we move forward. But pending your conversation, we didn't want to invest those resources until we had some direction. Pooled open position budget based on historical trends, leaving positions open until termination payouts recovered. That is a very clean way of not having a termination impact somebody's budget unexpectedly. And depending on the magnitude of that, the normal posting recruitment process may accommodate that anyways. And then looking at budgeting healthcare at the mid-level. So rather than single, it would be single with spouse, or excuse me, employee with spouse versus employee full family. Now, again, these are things that as we make the decisions, we need to recognize that any deviation from that assumption, of course, is going to impact the budget. And therefore, again, that ZBB reserve would be held there for instance, if someone came on with a full family in a very small department, that could have a really big impact on their budget, and having that fund available pooled, again, as an organization, the pool can be smaller than if we budgeted in each division.
So tell me, on healthcare, we don't budget for actuals, like if we have X amount of employee spouse, X amount of employee spouse family?
We do. I was speaking to the open positions. I'm sorry, I wasn't clear on that.
Open positions.
Yes.
Gotcha.
Yes. Absolutely.
Okay.
So, thoughts, questions, considerations, direction?
Well, let's listen to Gary if we're going to have the capital side.
Well, that's a separate discussion, I think.
It is.
So just some initial thoughts. I mean, I'm excited about this concept, probably not a surprise. I think it's important to note that the desire is not to reduce services in any stretch. Understand that there would be a transition time and definitely some grace involved with how we build this out. In my mind, it comes down to efficient use of taxpayer dollars. So, and we need to have a strong recognition of what the outcomes of this would be. So I'm not going to say this is a con, I'm going to say it's a challenge, that it would probably reduce a lot of the flexibility that we have within county government departments right now. So that's where we would definitely need to have some grace on our side of the dais here, and in order to help all of our department heads as they transition to this model. And when it comes to budgeting, one of the really easy examples, this would probably, I would think, decrease the fund balance we end up with at the end of the year, because we would be more efficiently using our money during the year, potentially.
Oh, the fund balance return?
Yes.
Yes.
Yes. So, as Commissioner Hewitt's talked about in the past, we would need to make sure we're budgeting for things such as snow removal, which we've been able to rely on salary savings and other things to account for that. So there's a lot to work through with this, but I think the work is worth it.
I think there are a lot of good things. Like I mentioned, my company, I have to justify my departments. Every year we do zero-based budgeting, and it does give the department heads that's really that sense of ownership, because each department within an organization really is your own little business, and how are you going to run that business more efficiently? And it makes me as a department head look at what we're spending and how, because I have to justify each line for this year, which then goes up for further review. So it really does make me take a hard look at my budget and make sure that I am making the best decisions for my business every year. So.
Thank you. Thank you both. Wanted to thank you for well stating the flexibility. That's the part I was having a hard time articulating. Yes, this takes away that flexibility. And on that note, it also would be would be incumbent upon the commissioners that recognizing that things are going to fluctuate. So again, this year I may not have an expense, but it happens every 2 years, and just recognizing that cyclicality, that this year I'm not asking for it, next year I'm going to, and that recognition that is routine versus being a question mark. So right now it would be a question mark.
And I do want to make sure that we're really clear, like Commissioner Colvin stated, if we were to go down this road, we are not reducing services. That really needs to be a goal associated with this, because I don't want to reduce services unless there are redundant service that we obviously don't need, but I don't want that message being put out there that, oh, we're cutting services. And through this zero-based budgeting, we may find there are some services that, are somewhat redundant that we can trim back on, which is another good thing to look at. But I don't want this to be looked at as, oh, we're having to trim services.
Thank you.
Well, seeing how we're asking questions now. So when I read through this, my first reaction was, and I wrote it down, is it worth it? So my experience with county government goes back to my days on the Board of Ed. from the late 90s. And the point was, is before your time, we had Elaine Kramer, God rest her soul, was our finance officer for many years. She was the finance officer on the Board of Ed. Had a lot of experience with her, very, very capable person. Now, Jeanette Cudmore, your predecessor, had been with us since 1998. And my point with all this is that this is this culture you've talked about that's been kind of established, ingrained in what we do. And I'm glad you've come on. And my point is you're entitled to a new viewpoint. Actually, that's probably why we hired you, to get a new viewpoint. I mean, let me just say, that's one of the reasons I voted for you. So I would say to you, what is your experience with this in your career with dealing with zero-based budgeting? Have you done it elsewhere?
I have, yes. 2 places. One where I came in and it was already established, and my just prior life, I established it. The question, is it worth it? Cost benefit, so obviously there's going to be a lot of resource allocation to it. In my view, my prior experience, yet to be determined what occurs here, but yes, it gave the managers more autonomy to have that conversation about what their goals were and what the resources they needed to meet them, rather than being looking at their budget from last year and going, okay, how do I make this work this year? Because if I,
Interesting.
I'm sorry?
No, I interrupted. Go ahead.
It increased transparency and ownership, again, by the managers being able to really see what exactly they had budgeted for, and when something, for instance, if they had a budget variance in their utilities, they were able to say, why do I have this budget variance? Because they knew what they had based it on. They had done the analysis and were able to identify when an invoice hadn't come in for a particular month or when these things hadn't occurred. It just gave them as much more knowledge of their budget as it did those of us looking at their budget.
All right, well, tell me, was it something that they had been doing differently before, now they were shifted to this new?
Correct.
Okay, and the outcomes were, at the end of the day, after a couple of years, whatever the timeline it took to shift, the outcomes were positive?
Yes.
Okay, well, that's good to know. And I write here financial impacts. So, hey, everybody wants a better mousetrap, can you afford to build it? The key gets to be is when you talk about additional potential manpower or employees or additional resources, is there a way that this savings pays for itself? If look, let me just give you a quick example. I remember I used to have a business. I have a guy come in and say, Mike, I need a new wheel alignment machine. It's only $40,000. I said, well, how are we going to pay for that thing? Well, we're going to do X amount a week. So we bought it. Do we do X amount a week? Some weeks we did, some weeks we didn't. But at the end of the day, it worked out better because of new technology. So that's what I'm getting at. If it at least breaks even or doesn't start this whole new process that doesn't pay for itself, or I hate to use the term pay for itself, but doesn't have a return on all that work and time and change of culture. And, again, it gets back to, is it worth it?
I will defer to the commissioners on that. Because it is not strictly a financial question. It's a question of what is the value of that additional information. Now, if that information is not actionable, then it's probably not worth very much. But if it is actionable and increases the transparency and you value that, then maybe it is. I had brought forth a request last year, which was denied, for increased bandwidth. But during this particular budget season, we don't have that increased bandwidth. We would be taking this on in conjunction with our current roles. So it is a heavy lift, and it would be a heavy lift throughout the organization, whichever.
Again, I worry about heavy lifts.
Right.
And what I would say in that regard is, first thing is, this idea of a pilot department or departments, I support that idea because I have written down here, start with finance. But if that's not big enough, but you couldn't go and, I don't think it'd be wise to ask a department that's, leadership is still being decided, DED, DPW&T, not to pick on anybody, just to say that we need to have someone who's been in that position a long enough time to understand what you're after and how to make that change. And the last thing I'll say here is we need to understand what will be different. I use the term to be effective, you need to be flexible because things are going to pop up, and whether there's snowstorms and whatever it may be, that you got to be able to react to it. So I do believe less flexibility, more rigid may not be the best way, but again, that's my opinion. And lastly, I'll say this. I think this is a good thing for the next board. Commissioner President Guy and I are term limited. We will be gone. There will be new people sitting in these seats. And 3 commissioners can return. We don't know what the new makeup will be, but this would definitely be a get your facts straight, get your, what's the term, do your research, you get your departments to say, hey, this was a good idea or a big lift and wasn't worth it. I mean, get those ducks lined up. And then when your new board comes in, you'll have 4 years of those people.
Okay.
All right,
Thank you.
That's my
I
comments.
think it'll be a good thing to provide to the next board is, hey, we've already got this process underway where you've got more transparency, more accountability, and I do think we need to ensure that we maintain flexibility as much as possible within the guidelines. So I think that's a good thing. I'm ready to move forward with it.
The first two you said, the accountability and the transparency is paramount, I think, especially with the budget, because you get people like, who are these people and what are they getting money for? Why are you giving these people money? Commissioner Colvin and I heard that about a month ago. Well, actually earlier this month. Under the cons, you have time-consuming and the high administrative burden. Now, do those 2 items actually reduce overtime after implementation? Is that something you've experienced with your with ZBB? Time-consuming as far as that, does it get easier as time goes on? That's what I'm trying to say, basically.
It does.
Okay.
But there is a learning curve. There is that refinement. I'm going to say 3 years. Yes.
Okay. And I was looking up something I had read earlier. So the state of North Carolina is getting ready to implement this in their next year, over the next year. It was their House Bill 142. And they're getting ready to do it and they're starting at the their executive branch, state law. So we'll see how that goes and for statewide implementation, which could be interesting.
I will share one example, too, that I think really highlights what I see the need for this. There was one of our departments, probably multiple departments, but one of our departments had a line item in the budget for newspaper subscriptions that they weren't using. So every year we were budgeting somewhere between $100 and $500 for newspaper subscriptions. The years where we inflated it by a certain percentage, it would grow. And there was at least 5 to 7 years where it wasn't touched. So that's a small amount of money, but it's money that's wrapped up in something that'll just end up in fund balance later or being realigned later, but it could have gone to another need right at the beginning of the budget. And I think that kind of fits the criteria of zero-based budgeting. We'd start from zero. What are we really going to spend money on this year? And that's a good thing.
And I've heard the term used in this conversation, being more functional, right? And one of the things I learned years ago, that something can be functional, and that's great, but is it efficient? In your experience, does this make each department more efficient?
I think that's mixed. So inefficiencies can pop out when you are doing zero-based budgeting and you start looking at exactly what you're spending money on and why you're spending it, and is that an activity we really need to engage in, or is it just something that we do because we've been doing it for the last 20 years? So efficiencies do come out of it.
Because at the end of the day, I want my departments in this large business that we have, albeit a nonprofit business, I want each department to be functional and efficient. And if so, more efficient. So if we're going to go into this, I want to see more efficiency come out of this for each department because we are looking at our budgeting a different way. And if that's, it's kind of like what Commissioner Hewitt said, is it worth it?
It depends on the level of efficiencies found, as far as that goes. But I think there's two kinds of efficiencies that we could refer to here. One is where we go through our analysis of what we're doing, and we internally decide that that is not something that we need to do anymore. You know, technology has progressed to the point where there's another methodology that is more efficient. The other is through the transparency, the commissioners being able to identify is that activity in alignment with the goals that we have in mind for the organization, or do you want to prioritize that activity at a lower level priority as far as the budget and the allocation of resources? I think that is another efficiency that can come out of this.
Something I just thought of when Mr. Ostro was bringing up his question. When we were at Mako this year, we found out about the extra burden of the government, of the county government, having to pay for the pre-K, the private pre-K. When we have unfunded mandates put down on us that we are not previously budgeted for, how do we respond to that with zero-based budgeting? Is that with the fund flexibility you have after the budgets are sent in, or how?
So initially, let me see if I've understood the question correctly with my answer.
Okay.
Initially, we'll have that ZBB reserve. So
Okay.
something that pops up after the budget has been approved, that would be one of those line items that would automatically be justified as mandated by the state. So there's really no way we could not do it. So there's the justification, and we would have that reserve available to be able to accommodate that. That is in our particular case, I'm thinking, that's a small number. For larger mandates, we might have to, reconvene for bigger budget realignment adjustments conversation if we were in the position of some of our fellow counties. Depends on the amount. Oh, I'm sorry, that's.
Okay, well, thank you. I mean, because 15 was like, oh, we're not getting hit that hard with 15, but, when they threw SDAT on us and when they, threw the teacher's pension on us, we have to be able to respond to those. And I just want to make sure we have our bases covered when something like that comes down from Annapolis.
That is going to be a pivot and reevaluate regardless of whether we're in incremental or zero-based.
This, I would think, it works well for, again, my company's been doing zero-based budgeting. It also helps identify needs that may have gone unnoticed in the past and may have gone unfunded in the past, because as you're looking harder at what your department needs and what your department's expenditures are, things do come up through the year and you're like, hey, this is something that we need to really look at and perhaps fund more or fund less. So,
Yeah, it can identify those gaps. As technology changes, so do regulations and different things that maybe weren't considered during the initial budget years ago.
Well, with all the departments we have right now, have you got some idea of like identifying a couple of departments that might work for your pilots? Other than yourself.
Other than us, yes. Have a couple of ideas, but we definitely would want to convene with not only the directors, but the county administrator for that evaluation and recommendation.
Sounds good. Okay.
and to touch on an unpopular subject, if and when, God forbid it ever happens, that we need to look at cutting budgets through this, is it easier to identify what we can cut when needed?
I think budget cuts are always a challenge, so I don't know about easier, but definitely a more informed, strategic cuts versus.
Cut 10% out of your budget, figure it out.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Do you need any further direction from us on this?
Well, I'd say
I
figure out some departments and come back and maybe tell us which ones you think, and, I mean, I'm in favor of you moving forward.
Okay,
So
thank
am
you.
I.
That's the direction I'm looking for. Is
Absolutely.
there consensus?
But I want to
I'm
do
all for
this.
moving forward too, yeah.
I want to do it strategically and identify maybe one or two, a few departments that we can then choose. I don't want to do a big bang thing because that would be, I think, detrimental. I agree with you.
All right.
I guess one last question too. Sorry, just to prolong the discussion a little longer. You mentioned it. Our partnering agencies are other elected officials that have their own budgets and other agencies that we support. They would all eventually fall into this model also?
Correct.
Okay, and so we need to ensure that they are educated on what the goal of this is and have the assurance that we're not trying to hurt their budgets, we're trying to help the
Definitely.
overall picture.
Stakeholder engagement is
Vital.
absolutely, absolutely.
Okay, well,
As is tone at the top, looking. All right, so.
we'll move on to CIP now.
All right, thank you. All right, our upcoming capital budget. So speaking again to what we have been doing historically and the conversations we had during our last budget process, our current methodology, any new CIP projects that come up automatically populate into that fifth year. They just go in there for your information and response, and that is a very, it would require someone bringing forth and pulling things off of that rather than them just being auto-populated. New requests submitted at full estimated cost without design and development analysis being done. And they're not always fully scoped. This is what we want to do, but it's an idea more than a refined proposal. New requests are not subject to bandwidth constraints. Again, everything just kind of auto-populates, and it takes, a consensus of the commissioners to remove those from the CIP. During the course of the year, as we move forward and through the year, we've heard some concerns and maybe some frustration that methodology is setting unrealistic expectations. And there's a lack of clarity and transparency about what it is we're actually going to be able to do and being able to be on that same page with that conversation. Another thing that occurs with the auto population is we do our debt capacity projections out. Well, it skews that because we've got this big number out there in year 6 that is probably not realistic, but we haven't refined it yet. And that is skewing that debt capacity calculation as well. So that's another consideration. Some of the projects are not actually going forward, again, because it's put out there at kind of this idea of what it might cost, but we don't have a refined estimate. And with that, those concerns were heard. We all heard them. Gary owned it and took the initiative to develop a CIP work group to start addressing some of these issues and concerns. The work group includes the county administrator, the directors, of course, DPW. He also has implemented or brought forth some ideas on how to address these concerns and how to move forward. And with that, I'm going to move to the next slide and turn it over to Gary.
Thank you. So what does zero-based budgeting look like with capital projects? Well, it's the same thing. Hammer the requirements early and process map. So what we've done with this working group is we've met and we've looked at all the steps along the way for a capital project. Now, my comments are, I have to caveat this, that my comments are on discrete and unique capital projects that we have on my side of the house with public facilities. We also have reoccurring capital projects where we add scope as we go along, but some of the same things still apply. I mean, and so mine are based upon actual discrete projects. We've identified 8 steps along the process. We've reviewed roles and responsibilities, as Vanetta has mentioned, and we've created a matrix of roles as we move through that process. And the intent is to basically break up a project into 3 main groups. Project planning, project development, and then actual construction. I mean, we know the construction phase fairly well. That's when we get the bids, that's when we move through construction and finish the project. There's a whole lot of work that goes on before that. And what we would like to be able to do is implement almost a two-step process in the planning and design phase of a capital project, where we spend a lot of time in the first phase just reviewing all the requirements. Do we have land for this? What are the zoning requirements? What is really the end user's goal? Can they articulate how this facility is going to work when it's turned over to them? Look at O&M costs that are going to be, brought into play for our maintenance phase at the very end of the project. Look at alternatives. And we want to be able to also do some cost estimating and ask the question, what do we know, but what don't we know at this point in terms of cost? Because without a fully developed design plan with a permit set where we've paid a consultant to spend lots of hours developing something that a contractor can bid on, our uncertainty is fairly high. So the challenge is to take the uncertainty in the true cost of the project, which is very broad in terms of probability at the beginning, and squeeze that probability in by doing design, by looking at alternatives. But by squeezing that probability, and you're also raising what you now know the cost of the project to be. And so we'd like to establish some procedures and some understandings of how we initiate a project. What is our planning budget going to be? How much detail do we need for that specific project? And we would like to not auto-populate the 5-year budget plan for you. We would like to bring you, if it's a new project, we'd like to bring it to you at a budget work session with our review of the project with the end user, how much we've articulated, and then give you the option of putting it in the 5-year plan if you think that there's enough feasibility for this to get done. And then if it's not, then it can stay in bounds to complete, but it's not effort that's wasted, because now we know the questions that we need to answer before it moves into the 5-year plan. So I think that's it in a nutshell, what we're proposing on the CIP side, which is zero-based budgeting, I guess, for capital.
Yeah, so initially, the analysis would be done, and it would be brought forth at a design and development cost estimate for prioritization, and then would not be put on the CIP full plan until that had been completed and we had an actual knowledge of what the full scope of the project would cost, at which point it would come back to the commissioners again for planning and prioritization. My understanding, correct me if I'm wrong, that design and development phase should have a shelf life of about 5 years.
Roughly, yes.
Yeah,
Yeah, so codes change, so you may have to do a code review as you move along. There may be other permit requirements that might change. The one thing I failed to mention is that to get to that point, we're going to have to spend some money. We may have to have a consultant give us a schematic design, do a cost estimate on to see if it's what we want to move forward. And I look back in our project history, and there is a precedent for this. So when we did the Adult Detention Center Housing Medical Unit addition and the existing facility upgrades, we were following the state process because we were pursuing state grants. And they have a formal process where there's a phase 1 project justification that you submit. That we paid a consultant money to help us develop that project justification, and we sent it forward to the state. They approved it. They said continue to phase 2, which is the detailed project description. And we went through that with the sheriff's office, with the corrections division, a lot of information. It looks like a design. It can almost make you think it's a design, but it's really not. It's just a very detailed description of what the project's going to do. That was approved, and then we moved into what everyone is used to being the capital project. Then we hired an architect and started the design process to completion. So the cost that we spent on that phase 1, phase 2 process was only 1% of the construction budget at the time. It was I think a very good investment to get someone to help us along to find the project. Now, that scale of project is on the one extreme of the spectrum, very large very large capital project, but I think the concept is valid. You need to spend a little bit of money to decide if you're going to spend more money. And that's what we have to work out.
So if you would be interested in moving forward with this year, the first year would be an initial heavy lift. We would be bringing back to you our current 5-year CIP projects with the status of each. And if they are not started, then we would be populating that with that design and development cost so that the commissioners can actively prioritize the projects accordingly. So it'll be a little more work this initial year to get that 5-year CIP a realistic look as to what is actually the priorities of the commissioner and implementable by staff.
Okay. Now, listening to you, I like the whole concept. And, you know, sitting here going on 11 years now, I have to say I see things like what I call the space needs study, which seemed to develop the CIP to an extent, and there were certain hinge points, i.e. the sheriff headquarters being built, which would allow for this department to move out for this changing around of these types of things. So when I look at the 5-year or the CIP, that is a concept that what we can do. Now, what we've continually run into is timeline to start construction, where we cannot start a project unless we have the money or the borrowing authority to do the project. So we go out and get this borrowing authority, and you know, then we end up with tens, if not hundreds of $1 million worth of borrowing authority that we're not using, or maybe we've obligated it, but the project doesn't start for 2 and 3 years. A good example is what we're going to start the groundbreaking on today, the St. Clements Island Museum. And that process somehow gets tied into procurement, which has to be also part of this total look.
Oh, yeah,
And
that's a major part of it.
Yeah, I think it's a huge part of it, because we always get, you know, when we're talking about the, I call it the evidence storage building, but maybe it's support services building for the sheriff's department. And we're 9 months out from being able to put it out for bid. That to me is, you know, hard to understand. I don't understand what takes so long. Once you have the money, once you have the design, once you have the project, I sometimes have frustration with why it takes so long. And the last thing I want to mention is when you talk about wanting to do these projects, and is what I call scope creep. Okay, and the sheriff's headquarters is a perfect example. Started out the evidence storage or support services building at one size, ends up increasing, and you know, what's the term, substantial in my opinion, 20-25%. Same thing with the headquarters. And then, you know, we're trying to get our head around what that's going to cost. So I would say to you is I support any ideas to look at this. But the key gets to be is shortening that time that allows us to, we've got the bonding, we've got the money, we've got the permitting, and we've got the land, got the resources, we figured out operation, maintenance costs, those types of things. We bought in. We need this thing. So whether it's going to change the CIP from what it is, or the schedule, the 5-year schedule. And actually the 6th year, in my opinion, Ms. Van Cleef.
It's okay.
Sorry. Is that it was always something we'd like to see done in the horizon. But putting it out in that 6th year or further out didn't mean it was actually going to happen. It probably, you know, it could or it couldn't depending on finances. But the key gets to be is developing a process that lets us start construction once we've lined the money up, once we've lined the permitting up, that we don't get so tied up. Do you think this will change that?
I think it will. I mean, I think the effort up front in the project definition phase would answer a lot of those questions that end up extending that design phase. Things crop up. Utility coordination maybe wasn't picked up early enough. We didn't pay enough attention to that. Or there is there's some conflict between the county's interpretation of what the design scope of work is versus what the consultant is. So we iron that out, clearly along the way. If the project is better defined in the very beginning, the project development will go smoother. We'll iron all that out. And that involves a lot more effort in the first phase. And again, it might involve some investment from a preliminary design from someone. We may need a survey. We may need soil borings. We may need something to happen in the field to take away those unknowns as we move along. I'm going to present to my colleagues on the Capital Budget Working Group. I did an analysis of 21 projects that have come across our group in the last 9 years, and I've looked at costs and increases and contingencies, and just to summarize, the added scope is the main reason of failure of meeting the initial budget. So
All right, well, let me hold you on that thought. So added scope seems to get involved in once the process is, we've already decided what we want to build. At least we think we know what we want to build. And we borrowed money to build that. And then we say, okay, well, let's go build it. But as we're getting through whatever that next process is, that next step, like in the sheriff's headquarters, it jumps by 10,000 square feet. And I think to myself, how in the world can we start out at 44, 40-some thousand, now we're up to 55, 56? It just does not seem reasonable that we should start a project that is not that fixed, not that look, this is the size of the building you're going to get. So what kind of things cause the creep to go up like that?
So for that, the 44,000 square foot number is based upon a initial study that a consultant does at looking at the program. That's not, that 44,000 isn't translated into an actual drawing. It's not a bid drawing. It hasn't been designed to that amount. So the challenge of the designer is to keep it in those parameters and still meet what the end user is trying to accomplish. So what's represented by an initial allocations of space needs to be looked at more in the first phase, so that there's room for growth that's actually allowed in that. So the validation of the requirement through the design phase brings in changes.
Well, it's hard as a decision maker, excuse me, to follow this process and say, look, we decided on something. We borrowed money to build it. Now it's changed because we didn't maybe figure it out right. A prime example in history, in my opinion, because you brought up the Adult Detention Center, when Commissioner President and I got elected back in 2014, the previous board had spent $1.3 million with an engineer, design company, whatever, to build or do a new jail, or whatever term we want to use, renovate or whatever. And then they found out for the $22 million budgeted, they couldn't build it because it was cost $29 million. Well, they wasted that $1.3 million that was for that money, and now we got to start all over again. And I'll give credit to some of these commissioners, at least 3 of us who are on this board, who pushed that jail through and got it done. But those are the types of things that I think taxpayers don't want to see. If you're going to design something that's going to cost X amount of money, don't let it creep so it gets so big that we can't afford, or if we have to do it, now we got to rob Peter, I shouldn't say that, but we have to allocate monies to pay for it, which is what we did, the $1.9 million for this museum today.
Right.
Right. I made my point.
All right, so just a quick question. Well, maybe not quick. I think I like what you're saying, especially the part about projects getting approved up here before they end up on the CIP plan. But I want to make sure I understand the new process here. So correct me if my summary is wrong here, but in essence, each project would have 2 approvals. We would have the initial approval to do the design work and figure out the scope of it, and then the second approval once we know a better cost to actually complete the project. Is that the correct way to view this?
Correct.
I like it. Thank you.
You know, when they go through these projects, I mean, like the sheriff's office is a big thing. Don't they, in initial design, look at, say, growth of the county? We're going to need X number of deputies more, or whatever it might be.
Well, space
When they're doing this, the
Right.
initial design.
They do. So
Why increase by almost 10,000 square feet is beyond, I just don't understand why they cannot look at that. I know this building's being built, we're going to use it for 25, 30 years or whatever. This will be the sheriff's headquarters. So all that should be added into this whole design to look at forecasting that 25 years. And it's just beyond me to all of a sudden they come back and we got this big increase in square footage and cost. And I'm hoping that we're looking at that more closely now.
Well, I think with this new process, right, because we'll have the initial, okay, we want to do this for approval, and then if we say yes, then you go forward, you do the actual design, so when you come back for the second approval, there should be no, if we were to approve that, we know the square footage, there should be no creep after that because we've already done the design.
preliminary design and then final design.
And that's final, and then we know
Preliminary
exactly how many
design,
square
final
feet.
design, construction.
It's going to be 50,000 square feet. There won't be any creep once we do the second approval. Yeah.
I understand that now, yeah, what
Yeah.
you're doing now. That's good that you're doing it that way. Our past experience has been not very good.
And that's the thing, what's like Commissioner Colvin said, once you say, hey, this building needs to be this big, this is what we want to do with it, that's it. I mean, once we approve it, there's no coming back going, oh, by the way, we need,
5,000
this.
more square
And it's
feet.
not just the sheriff's office, not just pick on the sheriff's office, but I'd say with the museum that we stayed at last week, it's, last minute, we need to, let's tweak this, let's tweak that, okay, then that expands the procurement process, and we're just sitting here just hemorrhaging money for design changes, and if we can identify spaces where we can be more efficient, with the procurement process. I've moaned about that since I've been on here. It takes too long, and by the time we get through that process, we're looking at, 10% cost increase. And we have to be able to eliminate that somehow, whether it's action we have to take as a board to reduce our own red tape, or however we can do it in the office upstairs to just make it more efficient and much quicker and try to beat the curve on inflation.
Right. I think the intent is after this first phase, we know an awful lot more about the requirements. The end users had plenty of time to articulate what they need. We've already done some preliminary site planning. We already have a much better idea than we enter into this process at this point. And so everybody can stand up and say, yeah, those are the requirements. And then from there, you're just finishing a design, you're getting your permits, and you're heading off, getting on the procurement calendar, getting this thing bid and getting it built. So that's it, I think, in a nutshell, and what we're proposing to implement.
One more question that I would have is, and almost to turn this, okay, so we understand there's the scope creep part, right, where designs can get a bit bigger, right, after we've already approved them. But one of the things that also happens, I think, way too often, this is a county, when and I'll use the animal shelter as a perfect example, that place was too small from the day we opened it. And now we have this issue where they have some serious space needs. Mm-hmm. Does this process also take into account that? Are we building something that is going to potentially be too small 5 years from now? So how are we looking at that so we can avoid, now we have to go in and spend millions of dollars that we shouldn't have had to spend to expand a facility if we can? Right.
And the sheriff's headquarters has future growth built into the numbers that they have. Mm-hmm. We also added additional space to the new Emergency Operations Center project. We were initially looking at about 15,000 square feet for that, and I believe at one of the budget work sessions, you asked that very question, is that enough for the future? And so we've taken that in consideration, and so we're building out for that need. For the animal shelter, I can't explain why we missed it.
Yeah.
I mean, I don't have an account.
Right,
I
yeah,
mean,
it is what it is. Right.
I can.
But yeah, that's one thing I want to make sure we're taking into account for further projects, that we
Yes.
are also looking at, okay, is this big enough?
So at the end of the Phase 1, we're representing to you, this is for the future that the end user thinks they're going to need based upon the growth numbers they're giving us. I mean, we're really depending on the end users to be able to articulate what they need. And actually, the reason I wanted to process this map for everybody is so that everybody else who's involved in this process knows what's coming and what maybe there's something that we should be discussing at this point in the budget. And if they're not hearing any conversation on that, then everybody in the group can say, where are you on this? So.
Excellent. No, I like it.
And it has significant input into the cash flow analysis as well. So having that information currently, the CIP plan, does not accurately represent what we need as far as cash flow. And this is a much more interactive and clear, transparent process.
Good. Seems to make it much more of an efficient process, I think.
Okay, move forward.
Any other questions?
Consensus?
Agreed. Move forward.
Move forward. Oh, yeah.
Thank you for the direction.
Light
Okay,
speed.
good.
Okay?
Thank you very much, everybody. Very good.
Thank you.
Thank you all. Next up, from the Office of the County Attorney, real property, a reverse transfer to the State Highway Administration. Ms. Buffy Giddens presenting. Welcome.
Morning.
Good morning.
So I'm here today to ask the commissioners to approve signing a deed that transfers 36,500, I think it's 90 square feet from the county to the State Highway Administration, and in exchange, the State Highway Administration would pay to the county $3,080. This stems from a 1973 conversion from the county to the State Highway. I'm sorry, I'm going to get this backwards. From the State Highway Administration to the county. We bought that property from the State Highway Administration for $1 back in 1973. In that deed, there was a reverter clause that said, should this property in the future not be used for a public purpose, it should revert back to the State Highway Administration. And at that time in the deed was fixed the amount that the State Highway Administration would be paying, which was $3,080. Moving forward in time, there was a survey conducted in 1977 that mistakenly identified the county's property as part of another parcel that was purchased by a private commercial entity. Relying on that deed, in the 90s, the commercial entity built a building, they made a parking lot on the county's property. So in the 90s, it was really no longer used for a public purpose. That then continued until August of 2015, which was when this company called Blue Heron bought the property. In 2025, they decided that they wanted, for whatever reason, to do a title search and just make sure they had good title to their property. And it was during that title search that they discovered this cloud on their title. They notified us, notified the state. The state said, we'd like to exercise that reverter clause, give the land back to us, we'll give you the $3,080. And so today I'm asking for signature on the deed that does that. They do have the check ready and waiting.
Okay, the state's going to give it to us?
Yes, the state's going to give us the $3,080.
And you said that the county paid $1 for the property initially?
It was nominal consideration, so it was either...
That is a good return on investment. I mean, if only all our investments were that good.
Well, I think the key is, at the end of the day, the mistake that was made, or if a mistake was made, I mean, because I don't understand how the people built the building or built the parking lot on property they didn't own. I mean, where was that mistake made?
That in the 90s, they had relied on that survey from 1977. So what I suspect is when the land was transferred over time, people thought that they were purchasing a larger parcel of land than they actually were.
Gosh, it seemed like that would have been caught in title searches back then.
You would think, but
Yeah, you would
it
think,
wasn't.
okay.
You would think so.
It wasn't.
World's not perfect.
Well, I move to approve the transfer of 0.84 acres of land located off Route 235 in Lexington Park, Maryland, to the Maryland State Highway Administration, and authorize Commissioner President to sign the related documents.
Second.
I have a first and second. All in favor? Aye. Any nays? Ayes have it. Thank you.
Thank you.
And that is all from County Administrator.
Okay, we go right into Commissioner's time, and we'll start with Commissioner Hewitt.
Oh, well, thank you. Well, beautiful weather we're having, thank God. Commissioner President Guy said it's, temperatures are great after this hot summer. But you know, Labor Day's creeping up on us next week, and it's amazing that summer's over. Wow, they fly by so fast, but you know, that's the way it is. And all we can do is, you know, hope for the best. So this past week, the YMCA Capital Campaign Committee did a tour of the building that's under construction down there in Lexington Park. And they were putting up the steel, which obviously is a big part of it because they hope to have it under roof here in the next, probably, what did he say, 6 weeks. So it goes pretty quick because I guess these pieces come in, they're big, it's like building a Erector set or, I don't know how it's spelled. Bottom line is, it's moving along very well. What they've just decided to do, many people have reached out and said, hey, we'd like to contribute, but, you know, YMCA hadn't asked for us to contribute in any way. You know, I'm willing to, you know, give something. I don't know what I can give, but give something. And their capital campaign has been going on, and it's been going pretty well. And the point is they're going to start what they call a GoFundMe page for people who want to just contribute small amounts, whatever they deem as they would like to see. And it's a good step, positive step forward. But this YMCA is going to be a county YMCA. Now, it was brought to my attention over the past couple weeks about something that was written up on internet, social media, whatever you want to call this. I don't really follow it that much, but other people do and bring things to my attention. And there was a point that, you know, a former commissioner was saying that, you know, this was Commissioner Hewitt's YMCA, and I'm proud to take responsibility, if that's the term. I don't think that's the term, but I took the leadership role in trying to get that done. I've been working on this for close to 9 years. But he called it my YMCA. Well, it made me look through my journals, which I keep a journal for every meeting. And back in July 26th of 2022, 4 commissioners voted for that YMCA. Myself, Commissioner Colvin, Commissioner President Guy, and then Commissioner John O'Connor. Todd Morgan, who was commissioner then, abstained. And Commissioner Morgan at that time was consistent. He always believed that the county could build this thing and run it. And obviously, I had a different opinion. That bottom line was, it was 4 commissioners who voted for it. And the article was written by one of the commissioners who voted for it and said, now he doesn't support it. But it wasn't Commissioner Morgan. Point is, this is going to be a good thing. My vision for YMCAs is always that there'd be 3 of them. One in the northern part of the county next to the senior center in Charlotte Hall. I actually believe one in the northern part of the county would do far better than anywhere else in the county because there's such a limited number of resources. But that's all of ours. That's going to be everybody's YMCA. It's going to be a good thing for everybody. I still believe that. Second thing was, there was a point in there about the Elks Lodge, which I'm a member and Commissioner Oster is a member, and how there would a state bond bill for them to do some improvements to their facility over there. This commissioner board never asked the state delegation to do a bond bill for the St. Mary's County Elks Lodge. Commissioner, then Commissioner, now Delegate Todd Morgan, is also a member of the Elks Lodge. He works at Nessie with senior leadership from the Elks Lodge, and this Board of Commissioners didn't know anything about it. They did that on their own on the side. We tried to ask for, you know, refrigerated vans that could help out with the food shelters, you know, providing pantries, shelters. And the bottom line was, that was something that former Commissioner, now current Delegate Todd Morgan did with leadership at the Elks Lodge that didn't include any of these commissioners. So I just want to make that straight. Now, lastly, none of that's really important, but it's, you know, it's getting ready to be an election year. And what we know is people will be attacking us, and it's been part of the program. And look, usually I let that stuff just run off my back. but I'm not running for commissioner again. I can't. And the bottom line is, I like to set the record straight. Thank you.
Thank you. Eric.
Very good. I'll be short this morning. This morning we talked about zero-based budgeting and changing kind of the way we look at our budgeting, and we talked about the CIP budgeting and commissioner approval. I think this is good stuff. I think we made positive step, but the hard work is still to come. But the key is it's the most efficient use of our taxpayer dollars, and that's what we want to do. We don't want to waste any taxpayer money. We want to be able to use it to provide the services that are needed for our county. And then also just wanted to touch on, it's been in the news for a while now that redistricting seems to be a hot topic. I mean, I know it was a hot topic when we did it locally here in the county, but now it's being looked at nationally. And I think most people agree with me or of the opinion that gerrymandering is wrong. It's really a shame to see Maryland wade into this fight because Maryland is one of the most gerrymandered states in the entire country. Anyone who looks at it can see that it's not fairly drawn. The lines are not fair in Maryland, and it's really a shame, and hopefully nothing more comes of it. Thank you.
Thank you.
That was quick indeed.
Mr. Alderson.
Okay, there's an old adage that goes, the days are long, but the years are short. Well, that is the exact polar opposite for this summer. And it seems like wasn't that long ago we were at, celebrating the 4th of July and the kids getting out of school, and here they are back in school for the 4th day. So it's 176 days left of instruction for the students and the teachers. So keep plugging away at it. We're here for you. This past week we had the grand opening, the ribbon cutting for the new Weiss supermarket in Charlotte Hall. I walked into that store, and very impressive store. What I really liked about it is the super wide aisles. I mean, you get two golf carts, listen to me, two grocery carts down the aisle side by side and still have room to maneuver. It's just fantastic. So this is their latest design for a building, and they decided to unveil it here. The entrance of the building faces east, so as the sun comes up, it's bathed in natural light, but it's filtered through a metal screen. It's very, very very attractive design. The store is very friendly to the shopper. It's very easy to maneuver and navigate. And like I said, shop the outside first, and you get to the inside where the junk is. But fresh salad bar. I was in there yesterday to grab a quick salad to take to work with me, and their meat selection looks fantastic. Really good sale on tomahawk steaks right now. But if you get a chance, go and visit there, especially if it's in your neck of the woods. I think it's worth the trip anyway. That store is going to service, a lot of people fail to realize that southern Charles County gets serviced by that also, because they can go to La Plata or Waldorf. But if you live on like Oaks Road, maybe 231 Hughesville area, much easier to come to that Weiss. And like I said before, come on down, shop, leave your money, go home. And then this past weekend, I went away to Lake Anna with my son and wife, my youngest son and my wife, and a friend of his, and just chilled all weekend. Love going down there. It's the reservoir for the cooling waters for the Lake Anna nuclear power plant. And so far, I have not grown a third eye or an extra arm, and so I'm going to continue going down there and hanging out with my friends and just enjoying some peace and quiet and some relaxation. If you get a chance, go hit it. It's worth the trip. It's a quick trip from here, but it's worth it. This afternoon, we did groundbreaking for the St. Clements Island Museum, and that came up in our discussion about the CIP. It's finally going to happen, and it's been a long time in the books. I believe, if I'm not mistaken, the idea for this predated me sitting in this seat. Couple of things. It is really great that Commissioner President Guy brought up Margaret Brent and voting. And this museum is going to provide that kind of history that some people may have forgotten or doesn't get taught, but only once a year in the month of March before Maryland Day. Matthias D'Souza was the first person of African descent to be voted into a state legislature. Happened right here in Maryland. You got a much larger display for the Piscataway tribe, which was only given lip service in the old museum. That's why the museum is going to be 2 stories tall, because there are a lot of relics and artifacts and history that need to be told for the story that needs to be told for the native, for the indigenous peoples in this area. And I'll say it again, and I'll say it again in March, that the first Roman Catholic Mass in the English-speaking colonies was held on St. Clement's Island. And that history needs to be told, and that's why this museum is so important. And I'm finally happy to be able to put a shovel on the ground for this thing. And I hope to see you there at 2 o'clock today. Thank you.
Commissioner Oster.
Well, I do want to also touch on the zero-based budgeting. This commissioner does believe that I've used it in my work for years with the company I currently work for, and I do believe it does add to more efficiency. It gives more autonomy to the department heads and to the managers, and it really makes us look at what we're budgeting for, why we're budgeting for these things. So I think that is going to be a very good program and a very good direction to move in. This past week, we had kids all back in school, and I just wanted to give a shout out to, I had an email from a concerned citizen about the striping and painting on Willows Road by the school there that had not been completed prior to school starting. And Willows Road can be a little bit of a speedway with people driving around, and without clear lanes and lines there, that is dangerous for the kids. It was brought to my attention. I reached out to our Deputy County Administrator, Mr. Yingling, and he immediately took action. We got that all taken care of almost right away. It was not, unfortunately, prior to school being open, because if you remember, we were having quite a bit of rain during that period, and you just can't paint in the rain outside. But it was handled very quickly and very efficiently. So a shout out to our Deputy County Administrator, and also our incredible DPT and W team, crews who went out there and got that taken care of, so we could make sure that we were maintaining a safe area and situation for our school kids going back to school. So great job for everybody on that. Appreciate it very much. This past week, was privileged to attend the RSVP dinner, the Retired Senior Volunteer Program. They do so much throughout our county, and it's just incredible to see the amount of work that these retirees do. I don't know how they do it. Some of them, I mean, so many hours of just time that they devote to be it delivering meals or helping out wherever possible and volunteering their time. Is absolutely incredible, and it saves the county a lot of money. I seem to remember the check being what, $70,000 somewhere.
700 and something.
700 and something $1,000 is that we would have had to pay as a county in lieu of not having these volunteers doing that. So that was fantastic, and I just a big shout out to them, and thank you so much for all the hard work and dedication that you show the citizens of this county. This past Friday, had a privilege to do one of my town halls at the Loeffler Senior Center. Had a great turnout there. Great topics were discussed. Really enjoyed doing that. And a lot of people came up to me and thanked me for bringing my town hall to the senior centers. And I really think I owe each and every one of the seniors an apology because I should have been doing this sooner. I should have started that, and I should have been doing this all along. So my assurance going forward that I will be doing one at each of the senior centers every quarter, as well as the one I hold that is a larger one at Bay District. If you missed me at Loeffler last Friday, this Thursday I will be at Garvey Senior Center at 10 a.m. To do another town hall presentation. And then on this September the 18th, I will be up at Northern Senior Center doing the same presentation, so everybody gets an opportunity. And I will be actually speaking with Cedar Lane and scheduling a time to go in there and do one as well, because our seniors are very important, and it's always good to hear what their perspective is. They have a very unique perspective they've seen so much in this county, and it's always just such a privilege to actually, I learned so much just listening to their comments and having conversations with them this past week, and I'm really greatly looking forward to continuing this process. So it was a learning time for this commissioner. Let's see. Yesterday we celebrated National Waffle Day, of all things, and I was privileged to be invited to come and cook for one of our local government contractors. So I went and made waffles for their team, and it was just an absolute fun day. And so I never knew we had a National Waffle Day. So I think that was just one of those fun times, and it's a privilege to be able to give back to the contractors who support our warfighters and support our base here. So that was a real privilege. This past week, I've got to give a shout out to my son, which makes me feel very old. My son, this past Sunday, turned 30 years old, and I never thought I would have a 30-year-old child. So really makes me feel my age. It is a privilege to to have family and children around. So with that, I will say thank you very much. Looking forward to seeing you back here on the 9th. We won't be having a meeting this coming Tuesday.
You're still very young, 30-year-old. My gosh.
It's my first year as a senior citizen this year.
39 or 40. Anyway, one shout out right now. I want to make sure everybody understands. School has just started, so the buses are on the road. The kids are out there. Obey the school zones as you go through. Slow down, please, and respect the buses, and help us get our children to school and grandchildren nowadays. But anyway, I do want to mention that, and the RSVP program was really great. We went to that, and I was very pleased. The number of people that was there, and we gave them all pins and everything for the years of service. And it's amazing the volunteers we got. We all, as we get older, you have a lot to offer people, and plus it keeps you a little busy, gets you out there. I sort of worried myself as I retired from this job after 11 years, now going to be 12. I need to do something just to stay in contact with people. I reckon I might volunteer for something like this. But anyway, and my wife right now is down in St. Mary's City. She's one of the tour guides down there at the museum. She volunteers every Tuesday. But she does various things like this to keep her busy. And so it's all good. There's a lot of things out here in our county, not only the boards we have, boards and commissions that we need people on, but all the volunteerism that's run by our staff here. It's very important that we keep ourselves active. Now, the Wise Market was really, that's a big market. My gosh, they did a heck of a job. And it was, like I say, the front elevation that you see built there is glass all the way up, and it's supposed to give almost total lights inside that building the entire time they're open, really. It's amazing what they did in that building, so to use the natural light inside. But very well equipped, a lot of good stuff. That day, the first day there, we had the opening. I bought a bunch of steaks because they had, this is unbelievable, Delmonico steaks for $6.99 a pound, which is unbelievable, unreal. So I bought 8 of them. Anyway, put them in the freezer. We ate 2 of them that night, put the rest of them in the freezer, but very good. And they also had something unusual, because I like once a year when we go over to Ocean City, Fisher's popcorn, the caramel popcorn I really like. And they had a whole rack of Fisher's popcorn inside the store. So I bought a smaller bag. I said, well, let me try this out and see if it's really truly the same thing. And it was absolutely delicious. It was the same stuff. Very good. So they have that. So it's very interesting. I appreciate that Mr. Wise himself was there for the grand opening, and he's getting ready to convert another store here in the area that's going to come in right here in Leonardtown. So look for that. Aldi's is going to open up one up there in Charlotte Hall. One in Lexington Park is almost ready. So I mean, it's amazing that all these things that we thought we were going to have food shortages in various areas now, wow, it's just it's jumping right back up in. So. I think the builders and the companies who recognize that we do need these, and they built, and it brings more economic development for us, and plus the Wise store up in Charlotte Hall, 75% of their employees are St. Mary's County citizens. That was to me, that was big. When I asked the store manager, I said, how many you got? Now, he lives in Calvary County, but his family lives over here in Charlotte Hall. Poole it's a well-known family name here, but he went over there because he was the manager of the store over in Prince Frederick, and they pulled him over there to manage this store. So it's very, very nice that we've got that kind of employment here. And I'm sure the other stores would be the same way. So he said they'd look for St. Mary's residents first and employed them depending on their expertise. So that's good, very good. And I look forward to all these stores opening up soon. We did a little history today about women history, and I'm falling back to a trip my wife and I took over to Washington State, and actually we did a cruise up the Snake River and everything, but it actually followed the Lewis and Clark expedition. And the big theme was Lewis and Clark probably would have never survived going through there because of various Indians if it hadn't been for a woman. They had this Indian maiden that traveled with them with a baby. And so all the Indian tribes that they went through felt there were no threat to them with this woman with them and a baby. So thank God there was a woman with them because they would have never made it to the Pacific Ocean.
Sacagawea.
Sacagawea.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. But it was very interesting to hear that what this is all about. So they all have come a long ways. With that being said, I want to remember everybody that St. Clements Island Museum, the groundbreaking is today at 2 o'clock. We'll be there. And for those who like to see it, come on out. We're putting a shovel in the ground and keep moving. So with that said,
I have one more thing.
One more thing, yes, sir.
Please indulge me. I just wanted to wish a happy 96th birthday to my great Aunt Nita. I know she was off this morning with her McDonald's breakfast crew, and probably going to hit up to Walmart and drive herself home. And more power to her. I hope I have the legs she does when I hit 96.
Oh, my gosh. That'd be great. That'd be great. All right.
Thank you, sir.
With that being said, adjourn.